S.T.A.L.K.E.R VR doesn't exist. There may be a way to play the flat screen game in VR, but there isn't a true S.T.A.L.K.E.R VR experience yet. There is, however, a game that comes close to hitting the S.T.A.L.K.E.R experience, and spoiler, it's not Into the Radius. Even going as far as to straight up make references to S.T.A.L.K.E.R characters and factions and use sounds. The game is Z.O.N.A Project X VR. Z.O.N.A Project X VR is a game made by AGaming, which I believe is a Ukrainian-based developer and potentially based on the Z.O.N.A Project X mobile game. Quick side note, since finishing Project X VR, S.T.A.L.K.E.R and S.T.A.L.K.E.R Mobile, I really want to deep dive on this developer's backlog because there are so many interesting titles that get updated way too frequently. Who is this developer? And what are all these games?
Start praying, scum. I'm coming. End of communication.
Now, I played through Into the Radius well before I got into S.T.A.L.K.E.R, which is a little backwards, I know. And while I loved it very much, I found the game world and story incredibly isolated. Outside of the turret that tracks you at the welcome gate, there are no signs of life inside or outside the radius. And something that I found so compelling about the S.T.A.L.K.E.R franchise is the interpersonal conflicts and resolutions that play out in the zone. You feel like you are a part of a bigger story. There is a struggle to find balance or control of the zone, and you can directly see others dealing with it. Into the Radius didn't really have this, and instead focused more on the research tasks and the enigma behind the white statue girl. Once again, I loved it, just different vibe. Z.O.N.A has a rather dramatic story that does include elements of the interpersonal conflict and resolution that I loved about S.T.A.L.K.E.R, though it's fairly on rails and not subtle.
What the heck is this? Holy mother.
What? At its core, it's absolutely a game about lootin' and shootin'. There are anomalies, there are mutants and military, there are artifacts. When I first played it last year, the game was incredibly janky, used AI voices,
Look who's in Hollywood,
and had some pretty bad enemy AI. The first couple of missions felt like it could have been a VR chat map, because you were approaching static NPCs, getting some orders and then zooming along a mostly linear path. The combat was entirely underwhelming. If you stopped playing after about 30 minutes, I wouldn't fault you for thinking that this game wasn't worth your time, because honestly, that's what I did when I purchased it months and months ago. I picked it up and put it down. I then started to notice how often the developer was patching the game. They were constantly updating the community with fixes, taking feedback on board from reviews and making improvements based on the feedback. They implemented new systems and even added raid missions. Sometimes you buy a game, get a lackluster experience, and then shelve it because there is nothing being offered to challenge that past experience. AGaming Plus is an example of what a passionate developer can bring to a stubborn goblin like myself. And it's great to see. Jumping back in, the game was still pretty janky and still had the AI voices.
Thank you for the work you've done.
But I noticed that the issues I had with handling the backpack were gone. Guns felt more responsive and combat more enjoyable. There's a shop. Information about weapons and repair were all there. The gameplay loop was decent, and the environments, enemies, and anomalies progressively more intriguing as I played on. I got sucked in and wanted to progress further into the game just to see how things kept changing. It scratched a familiar itch that I experienced in S.T.A.L.K.E.R. And before long, I realized the reason why I kept jumping back in was because I was having fun. This game is far from perfect. But in my opinion, sometimes fun is enough. Despite the fact there are no autosaves, and if you die, you can only go back to the main menu. Despite the fact that sometimes progression is not obvious in a map that is unnecessarily sprawling. Despite the fact that the dialogue feels like it's being read by a deep-fake dead celebrity trying to scam your grandma for her credit card info.
Whoa, hold your horses.
Z.O.N.A Project X VR is weirdly fun and constantly being made better by an incredibly passionate developer. I am interested to see what Z.O.N.A Project Origin has going on and just how much these games grow and change based on feedback. Maybe one day we'll have S.T.A.L.K.E.R VR, but until then, I'm glad I gave Z.O.N.A Project X VR a second chance. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video that YouTube recommends. Cheers.